interesting. I found the one you had with Noam Chomsky. Um, and what I found really interesting about it, I mean, you never really mentioned the words a hard problem of consciousness, but I think
Yeah.
that's kind of what you tried Noam Chomsky to see or at least acknowledge or talk about.
Yes.
But I'm not
It
sure
didn't
if
work.
yeah, it looked like it didn't work. I mean, I remember he said something like what it's like to see the sunset. That's not a scientific question.
What's it like to see the sunset? I understand the utterance, but I understand it well enough to know that it's not a well-formed question. It may have the syntactic structure of a question, but to be a well-formed question, it must be something that has possible answers.
In terms of the scientific answers.
In terms of anything.
So
And maybe
so
that's too vague of a concept. I should have done something more specific, like
right. But do you think no, my question is, do you think he just denies that there is a hard problem of consciousness, or was it more like that there was a disconnect and he, if you know, maybe expressed in a different way, he would acknowledge, in fact, that there's this problem?
well, yeah. So I don't even think you need to have it be a hard problem of consciousness. So, I mean, if by hard problem you mean something that is outside of the realms of ordinary scientific explanation, so you could just have the view be a functionalist and say, yes, there's something that it's like to see red or to have a particular experience, and there's nothing that's overly that is a functional property. Someone could say, I mean, I don't really tend to like that way of talking, but I'm open, to thinking about it. So I don't really even think so the hard problem is just the idea that there's something about consciousness that resists normal scientific explanation in such a way that leaves it outside of the realm of natural normal scientific discourse. And so I think Chomsky denies that, and that's what he is sort of denying. But I don't know. It's very hard for me to pin him down and actually figure out what he objected to, because sometimes he sounds like an illusionist and that there is no such thing as phenomenal consciousness. Other times he sounds like he's just saying, no, consciousness is just an ordinary thing that can be explained by scientific means. And so, yeah, I should have moved on, but I kind of got fixated on that point. Because I was like, it just seems obvious to me that there is something that it's like to see red. That is the thing that we want a theory of consciousness to explain. And I don't really understand how anyone could deny that. It seems that way, or that's what science is aiming to try to understand. So, yeah, I find it very confusing thinking about his view. I mean, I know generally speaking that what his view is that once the post-Cartesian, fiasco occurred, but we don't really know what it means to be physical, and therefore we don't really know what it means to say that consciousness is physical. So I understand that view. I think it's very interesting. But to say that, this other thing isn't a scientific concept or can't be addressed by science, I'm not really sure. I mean, there's multiple ways you can interpret that, and I'm not really sure which one is his considered view.
Right. Because I mean, he kept saying like the what it's like to see a sunset or what it's like for things to move. He said this is a matter of poetry. If you want to describe these things, science is not the right tool to address these topics. But I think the question is like, why is it that there's something that it's like to see the sunset? That is the question, and it seems like it can never be described in materialistic terms. Or I mean, at least from my position, I mean that's not to say that it's impossible. But I want to say something else, namely the thing you kind of I think very politely implied or insinuated that his view may preclude people or discourage them from taking the topic of consciousness seriously and engage with it scientifically. But even though I'm completely on board with your view that there is this hard problem, couldn't it be argued the other way as well? Like if you say there is this hard problem, it's not possible to take objective descriptions in order to arrive at these subjective states of minds. There's kind of this explanatory gap. Aren't you then? Could this view not in the same way lead you to believe, well, it's hopeless. Science can't do anything about it. It's just leave it to the poets to talk about consciousness.
Yeah. So first of all, my view is that there seems to be a hard problem, but that in the fullness of time, we'll figure out that there isn't. So I guess I've always kind of been that, having that in the back of my mind, that I agree that when you first come to this stuff, it certainly seems like there's this mystery there, but I don't think the mystery is permanent or unsolvable. So I wouldn't go so far as to say this entails dualism or you should be open to, anti-physicalist views. I'm still a physicalist. But anyway, so I think that even if you do think that there's some kind of real fundamental problem here, it wouldn't lead you to being anti-scientific, because whatever the case is, there's got to be some kind of laws which connect the consciousness stuff to the physical stuff. So even if you were a dualist, a property dualist, a substance dualist, or whatever, we know enough about the brain, I would say, or the body generally speaking, in order for us to conclude that there's got to be some law-like regularities that explain why it is that certain states of the brain correlate with certain conscious states in a kind of regular way, so that science still has a lot to do, even if it doesn't ultimately explain the conscious properties, which is what the dualists think. This is why Chalmers called his view way back in the old days naturalistic dualism. The naturalistic part was supposed to kind of hint at the idea that there's a law-like connection between the non-physical consciousness stuff and the physical workings of the brain, so that they aren't completely disjointed from each other. They're part of the natural world by having this law-like connection between them. So I don't prefer dualism, but I think that even the dualist should say that there's plenty of stuff that we would want to have a science of consciousness construct and answer questions. And then secondly, the dualist might possibly say, well, look, your conception of science is too narrow, because by science you're thinking of empirical science, but there could be a broader notion of science which includes the empirical science plus the discovery of these laws which connect the non-physical stuff to the physical stuff. And so you could still have a science of consciousness, but it just wouldn't be a physicalistic science in the way that we understand it now. It'd have to introduce consciousness as a basic property or some fundamental attribute or something like that. So I don't really think that accepting a hard problem, even the hardcore kind that leads you to dualism, precludes science having an important role in figuring out what consciousness is.